Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here. I'm coming from a completely different industry that the rest of the speakers here. I'm from the oil and gas industry, and probably a bit unusual that we speak at these conferences. The topic for my speech today is, can a safer and more sustainable approach provide an economic upside? And just to give you a bit of a background, I set the scene for my presentation and the scene for the company I work for. Our vision as a company is to transform the oil and gas industry so it becomes safer, more sustainable, and has a higher recovery. And it's actually a vision we put together for 20 years ago. And a lot of these sort of sustainability words you're seeing today is actually quite new, where we actually set off as a company 20 years ago on this agenda. What we do is, we call it disruptive innovation. We are the pioneers in what is called robotic well interventions in the oil and gas industry. And probably none of you have ever heard about that before. So you had to sort of, probably the closest you're getting to something a bit similar is in the medical industry, where we have keyhole surgery. In the old days, you had open heart surgery, where that is more or less replaced today by keyhole surgery. So very small, nimble instruments, you're able to actually do more or less the same as a true open heart surgery. That means that you will actually, it not only becomes safer for the patient, it's faster, it's less expensive. And that's exactly the same thing we're achieving for the oil and gas industry. And just to give you a feeling for it, the tool and the equipment, the robotics we're actually using are actually the size of the glass here. And again, just to give you another sort of feeling for it, that when you sit in the airplane and listen to the pilot saying, now we are flying at 30,000 feet, we're actually 30,000 feet below the surface instead. And of course, there are extreme pressures, extreme temperatures. So it's quite a bit of a challenge to get this equipment to work. And what we solve is a large variety of problems. And you can imagine, just like humans, oil wells have issues. They scale up, produce water, produce sand. And all that can be optimized. So we're actually replacing full-size semi-submersibles, rigs, full-size platforms with actually small robotic devices. And that actually puts a different spin on things, because suddenly you can imagine that an energy industry is actually using much less energy to actually extract energy. And therefore, our contribution in terms of reduced CO2 footprint is actually enormous. As we are talking about millions of tons of CO2 saved just in the extraction process itself. And that's probably something that very few have actually realized and actually know. And just to give you sort of an example on the impact we've had, you probably know our neighbor country, Norway, has been one of the richest countries in the world now. Now the biggest sovereign wealth fund that exists. And today, roughly half their oil production actually derived from well intervention. So continuously optimizing their recovery rates, continuously optimizing the production. And of course, as you all know, if there's something that's dear to everyone in Scandinavia, then it's safety, it's environmentally correctness, and then of course at the same time, it doesn't hurt if we can make money at it also. And just to give you a bit of a sort of a numbers here, these small robotic devices actually consume something like roughly 1.5 kilowatts, equivalent to a hairdryer. And then we're displacing drilling rigs that actually have 10,000s of horsepower kilowatts. So you can imagine that the CO2 print and the CO2 impact is actually enormous. And what you have to bear in mind is that roughly 1/5 of the oil production coming out of the ground actually reused or used in the extraction process in itself. So given that you can reduce that upfront consumption of energy, you actually have much more energy to provide to the consumers. And that's actually also what we're seeing today. You're seeing sort of an oil production that's actually not sort of increased that much, and we at the same time see efficiency gains in quite a bit of the industries that consume our hydrocarbons. We see more efficient cars, we see more efficient trucks, more efficient airplanes. So all that sort of efficiency gains are really taking place now. So not only are we seeing a much more energy efficient oil industry, but we're seeing a much more efficient sort of transportation industry. And if you look at it, the primary user of hydrocarbons as in liquid hydrocarbons are, of course, the transportation sector. And if you look at the transportation sector, that's what brings us to work every day. Airplanes, buses, trucks, you name it. Where the other part of what we call fossil fuels is actually coal. And what we've seen is that where hydrocarbon production and hydrocarbon consumption is actually at a very sort of leveled out sort of a level right now, where we can see an increase in coal, increasing quite dramatically, and we see a move, particularly in China, towards coal-fired electricity plants. And we had the gentleman before that talked about the Greenpeace report and detox. Actually, if we look at the oil industry and we look at how actually things are developing, they had in the latest sort of 2012 report looking at energy efficiencies. And their energy efficiencies actually played a much bigger role than any biofuel or any renewables. So this transition, this evolution is actually taking place, and can't probably not give Greenpeace the credit for it, but actually the credit actually it's really simple. It's because once energy starts to cost money, there's money in optimizing. And therefore, if energy efficient gains are continuously achieved, and as our cars get older, we replace them with newer, better, more energy efficient cars, and all that process, of course, will take years to go through, like sort of 10 years, 20 years. All that means that our transportation sector, that is the primary user of liquid hydrocarbons, would actually not have the predicted sort of increase that we saw in a lot of reports coming back probably sort of 10 years ago, where we looked at CO2 emissions, we looked at a rapid increase in CO2 emission. But actually what you're seeing today is actually it's flattening out because of all these energy efficiency gains. And one thing that's probably quite clear is that when the oil price back in 2008 went through the roof, went up to $180 and $150 a barrel, the world's sort of economy more or less collapsed. So there's a very clear link between sort of the liquid hydrocarbons and the ability for our civilization to actually function. So we can only sort of be quite pleased today that the oil price is not going through the roof, because that means actually our world economic is actually in a healing process right now as we speak. And I know here in Europe we are sort of looking very much at the shale plays in the US and what effect that has. And what it actually does in reality is that CO2 footprint in the US is actually dropping much faster than anyone had anticipated. So we were actually seeing an improvement much faster than anyone had anticipated. And of course, one of the challenges is moving over to sort of biofuels, is that biofuels actually equals food as well. And once the oil price gets sort of above $100, $120, $150 a barrel, then food can just be converted into fuel. There's basically no difference between biodiesel and ordinary diesel. It's same product, same, more or less produced the same way by solar energy. Only thing is that then we're just taking food away from the market, and therefore driving up pricing on food. And of course, the ideal thing would be to only produce from waste, but we're still sort of lacking the bit of technology on the waste side to actually produce enough sort of biofuels just based on waste. So in our view, extracting oil and gas in a safe, sustainable way, being very environmentally correct, is actually a healthy way to look at it. There is oil to be produced for many years, with many generations still left. The perception that we reached peak oil a number of years ago, or peak oil should be in the very near future, is actually not the case. And if you go back to the vision of our company 20 years ago was increasing the recovery factor. And today, most oil reservoirs only have a recovery factor around 35%. And if you increase that to 50, 60%, then the oil left in the ground is quite sort of substantial. So a period here going forward where we have the opportunity to actually gradually, of course, move to a more broader sort of energy consumption picture is right here in front of us, and we have the golden opportunity actually to utilize it. We have the golden opportunity to do what they're actually doing in the Middle East already. They're trying to bring the deserts back to sort of green oases, which they used to were back in time. And that's probably something we cannot do as industry. We can't sort of do any greenification of desert areas where politicians can play that role instead. But we as industry can definitely improve on our efficiencies, make sure we operate in a safe manner and are very environmentally correct in every aspect of our industry. So thank you.
Oh.